Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me here at Dutch Design Week's my first time, and it's really wonderful. Lots of pressure here, being the last one to wrap up all these wonderful talks. We've heard a lot today about the impact that design and architecture makes on us as as human beings, as societies, and when we're in school, we learn, we learn what makes good space, and we talk about it. We talk about all the time what makes good space, what makes bad space. But I think what we're not really trained, educated, prepared for is, how we navigate this process of getting from the design to actually, having it built in reality, where it can make an impact. Because if it doesn't get done, it has no impact. And so, I know that I was completely unprepared for my first project, which was a waterfront park that my partners and I won as a competition right out of grad school. And we thought like, hey, great, we won. We'll go build it. And we were actually like really shocked that there was controversy and opposition to building this wonderful thing that we had created. And this is actually what the site looked like when we started. It was just like a horrible, sort of desolate eyesore in the middle of this kind of rundown village out at the tip of Long Island. And we thought, why wouldn't anyone want this wonderful creation that we've designed? And it was really that there was a lot of different ideas that people had about what this space should be used for that hadn't really been explored kind of prior to the competition. We were just given a brief, we filled it, we thought that's it. So it took almost a year from the time of winning the competition, getting a contract, to like actually getting to the point where we could have a design that everyone was on board with and agreed on, so that we could like actually move forward with it. And today this is a really vibrant, wonderful place. But it took that time of kind of going back to the drawing board and learning how to engage the community in a dialogue to understand like what they actually wanted here and what they could agree upon to share. And I think what I learned is that people are afraid. They're afraid of giving up territory. They're afraid of giving up control. But that's what shared space is. And so I think as designers, it's really part of our job not just to like sort of come up with this great vision, but to really learn to engage in that dialogue, so that it's not about our vision, it's not about our client's vision necessarily, if that's a city agency or a town board, but it's really like, how do we create this shared vision of the community? So to create spaces that are really vibrant, that really get used, and can become this really kind of social heart of communities. And so I think everything that we learned through this project, we've taken forward into designing many more public spaces and green space, in particular parks. I think I've come to call this the battle of the benches versus ball fields, right? Because there's this kind of there's usually a kind of a controversy between, should we just have sort of place for quiet contemplation? Should we have sports? Should we have things that are more active? And so whenever you get to these spaces, all of those kind of competing interests come to the forefront, and we have to figure out a way to navigate them. And this was especially true on a project we did for New York City's East River Waterfront. And this is a site that spans about 10 miles from the tip of Lower Manhattan at the Battery up past South Street Seaport, the Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge. We go through Chinatown. We've got up at the northern end, we've got some public housing and a sanitation depot sitting right there, blocking the view of the waterfront. And this is what the site kind of looked like when we first came to it. And there had been, I think, something like 15 proposals over a 20-year period for this site that had failed to win approval, and so it sat like this. And because we were willing to engage this process, this very, very complicated process of city agencies and public review, 3 community boards, we actually had over 200 public meetings in a 3-year period to get this project approved. And today it's built, most of it. I think this has been over a 10 or 15-year process, actually, from the time we did the master plan. I didn't have kids then, and I have a 16-year-old now. So, and what's really great is that because we engaged the community, we were able to kind of come up with this very granular design that kind of addresses many different parts of the community, from office workers coming out to have lunch, to up in Chinatown, the Chinese community, they love to come out and exercise and do Tai Chi. And then up at the northern end, we have the sanitation depot. We use the design of the park to screen that white screen that you see. That actually will get planted with vines, so it will become green space. And then use that as a backdrop for lawn and these huge swings that just look out over back to the Brooklyn Bridge. And we also thought a lot about the different kind of scale of groups that would be coming, from individuals that just want to kind of have a quiet place to sit, enjoy the view, get down. We literally call these the get downs, where you can get close to the water. To more active spaces. We have some restaurants and bars that kind of tuck in under that elevated highway there, to actually very large-scale spaces where you can come out and enjoy a concert or a movie or a festival. And then, of course, not to leave anyone out, dog runs, very popular. So these are the kind of dialogues that we engage in around green space and parks. But what happens when we get to urban space, city fabric? It's not quite as clear-cut often, because you have competing public and private interests. We can have zoning and planning, but you still need someone to come and spend private money to actually build that urban fabric. We participated in a project. It's actually partly complete now. Again, it's been a long-term process, but this was a master plan for a part of the city initially called Seward Park. Later on, marketing folks got involved. It became Essex Crossing, which sounds much nicer. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Crossing Delancey. That's this area. It's a sort of old Jewish tenement neighborhood in Lower Manhattan. And so, Essex Crossing Delancey, it sounded good. This was 1.6 million square feet of mixed-use development, from residential, commercial, cultural, community facility, with connections to mass transit, and spanned 9 city blocks. So this was obviously not going to get built with city funding. The city controlled the site. This was an area that actually got demolished in the 60s as part of urban renewal, we called it. And then it just never got rebuilt. It got mired in sort of political shenanigans. It got paved over as parking lots, and it sat empty until very recently. And in 2008, the city began a new effort to create a plan for this neighborhood and get it developed. And they started engaging with the community in 2008, and that process ran until 2013. And that's when they issued the RFP, which was request for proposals, to development teams. We got involved by being asked to join a development team, and there was a bid that went forward. And we call this process in America, we call this P3, which is a public-private partnership. And it's basically where the city or the public entity teams with private development financing to get a project like this built. And as I said, we joined the team as a planner. By the time it was finished, there was probably 6 or 7 architects on the team because we didn't build it all, obviously. We have a few buildings that we wound up doing. And I think one of the things that's really tricky about, for the designer, engaging in a process this way is that the stakeholders we're designing for, the public, the city, are not our clients. So our client is the developer. And so you have to be careful how you navigate that. But luckily for us, because the city had done such a really good job of engaging with the community prior to the issuance of the RFP, there was a lot of the things that the community really desired were codified into the requirements of that proposal. So one of the things that was really important to them was maintaining this kind of small scale. So we have 9 city blocks. We're connected to mass transit, but we wanted to keep that small scale and porosity of the blocks at the street level. And then the other thing that was really important was having the cultural community public space integrated throughout. So that was another thing that was really great, that we got to kind of layer those spaces in rather than kind of having them zoned into this block is community and this block is residential. It's all intermixed. And here you see a section. This is kind of a typical diagram section through this spine. You can see that the large-scale spaces connect to transit below grade. Then we have the smaller scale spaces at grade, at street level. And then anything that was kind of larger, movie theaters, big box retail, things like that, they went up top. And here's the one of the buildings that we did design, the International Center for Photography, and you can see how that kind of diagram is executed with the large-scale galleries up above, and then the retail and the lobby kind of meeting the retail height at the street. And I think it's really important to remember that it's not just physical space that we share. There's also the space of memory and history. And it was really important to this community to maintain that feeling. Like I said, this was a tenant, this was Jewish tenement neighborhood originally. It's now very diverse, multicultural, but still that kind of feeling of the old neighborhood, the Essex market. There were still a lot of delis and ethnic foods around here, and so it was really important to them that we bring that feeling to the project. So as we moved into designing the market line, which is this big food hall, it's the other space that we did, it was really important to keep that feeling, kind of evoke that sense of neighborhood as we move. So it's sort of going past, going in the future, but also evoking a bit of the past to kind of maintain that link and that sense of community. And then I'm just going to leave you with a few thoughts about another kind of shared space, which is workspace. And this is, we spend a lot of time at work, and the kinds of I think that social space, shared space at work is becoming really something that we're seeing a lot of demand for. And we're moving away from the private offices and even sort of private desks to having more places where people can kind of mix informally, and it really helps with with people getting to know each other in a more kind of social setting. So it helps with building trust and collaboration and building and disseminating a company's culture. And these spaces often sort of take the form of amenities like cafeterias, lounge spaces, maybe like game areas. And we see a lot of this, like the most lavish amenities we tend to see in corporate headquarters, places like, Google, Apple, Facebook, big tech companies. They have, like really, really lavish amenities for their employees. But, these are single tenant, single organization. There's a very kind of homogeneous culture in these corporate headquarters. If you go to like co-working spaces, they also have typically pretty great shared amenities. But this is for someone renting a desk, so it's for an individual or very small companies. It doesn't have necessarily widespread application for kind of mainstream working, most firms. I think by far the vast majority of work today takes place in multi-tenant office buildings. And if you sort of zoom out of the individual office building and you zoom out and you look at that building as a whole, what you wind up seeing is like there's a ton of repetition, but maybe not like a lot of diversity of those kind of spaces, and maybe not great spaces, right? Because everybody's got a pantry, everybody's maybe got a lounge, a couple people have ping pong tables, but like, they're. And again, these companies are very siloed. They come in, you go up the elevator, you go to work, you have lunch with your coworkers, and then you go home, and you really don't mix with other people in the building. And then people don't really get to share in, like, if you put all of this amenity space together, you could maybe have more diversity and better amenities. So we're seeing a new kind of multi-tenant office building emerging, which is where we think of this building as a community with shared social space. And we started thinking about this model when we got involved with a particular renovation project in Midtown Manhattan. And it's kind of an interesting concept. This client had an existing technology incubator in the building called Grand Central Tech. And their idea was that as companies graduated from this incubator, that they would take space in the building. But they were having a really tough time with this because, it's like this sort of stodgy corporate office building, and the tech companies that were graduating wanted to be in a more kind of like, active, cool space, downtown vibe, hip neighborhood. So our challenge was really to think about how do we bring that neighborhood and that vibe into the building. So it began with a programming exercise, and we really thought a lot about, what are the different kinds of activities we can bring into the building, both open to the public, and then things that would be, just for tenants only. We had another really big challenge with the building besides the programming, and that was the actual physical fabric of the building itself. And I think this is where that kind of, that look and feel of design really is really important, because it talks about the narrative that you're building. And the narrative of this building through its look and feel was just screaming, corporate bank headquarters circa 1980, which is exactly what it was. And this was sort of the opposite of the culture and the identity of the tech firms that they were trying to attract and retain. So, our first job was, in addition to the programming of what's going to go here is, how do we erase that one narrative and replace it with a new one? And that really became through creating a kind of a hospitality feel. So, stripping off all of the boring beige metal panels and bringing in natural materials, raw materials, and then blowing out the walls, creating like really great vistas through the building, and giving it that kind of relaxed hotel lobby kind of vibe, and and then creating a lot of spaces like coffee shops and places where you can kind of meet and greet with your coworkers, but also other people in the building. Grab a drink. This is a bar that's just like a regular bar, open to the public. They're thinking during the day maybe it would just be open for tenants, and then you could come here with your laptop, hang out, meet with people. At night it becomes a real bar. Also, as the design evolved, the business plan did as well. So they started really thinking of like, oh wow, there's great synergies we could have here. What if the bar, we could hold, we could hold talks here. People in the building could do a book reading. We have retail spaces. Well, why not make that, pop-up retail? Maybe someone who's one of our tenants who's doing some kind of new product, they could actually beta test their products here. We could have product placements in the spa. And so, this is great, but again, there's like, what's the delivery? How do we get this done? They have to charge rent in the building. So this building had kind of like really dismal occupancy rates. So one of the first things that we did is we built out 3 floors of the building, completely fitted out, small, medium, large office spaces. It comes with pantries, conference rooms, desking. Everything is there. You just walk in and you start working. And you also see like in green, those spaces were reserved for venture capital firms. So they're also thinking about like, what's this mix where we can put, we can put fledgling companies with great ideas together with the venture capital that's looking for great ideas to finance. And this was the first thing that we built. We literally could not build them fast enough. They were leased before we could get them done, and we went on to do more floors up in the building with these spaces. Coming online soon, actually this should hopefully be ready for me to see when I go back, is the tenant-only spaces. This is a double-height lounge that looks out into that atrium. We've got a cafeteria. And a fabulous rooftop terrace that looks out onto Grand Central Station. So, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this kind of model as the ideas of shared space move, out of just parks and plazas into city fabric and the workplace. Thank you.